How are things going in the countryside, Alexander? As I set some things up. How's the weather out
Well,
there?
right, the weather's been very changeable as it often is in England. So we got a very hot day on Saturday, a cooler day on Sunday. Monday is supposed to be a bit warmer again. It is mixed, but England is always beautiful in the countryside. And we have a amazingly beautiful countryside. And the other thing, though, which really struck me is that, of course, the English love their countryside. In summer, they often travel around it, but you see it in campsites now, you see in hotels, you see outside houses, you see the England flag flying. That's the white flag with the red cross. Now, that doesn't sound like anything dramatic,
Mm-hmm.
but in terms of recent British history, it is. I mean, the British used to put up the Union Jack, not the England flag, at least not in England, because the English always took pride in the fact that they were part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain, and now they're asserting themselves as a separate nation within the United Kingdom for the first time. And I can't help but think that this is, in fact, a major catalyst for Brexit and a major consequence of Brexit, because, of course, England, which accounts for something like 90% of the population of the United Kingdom, is has voted for Brexit, whereas other parts of the United Kingdom, like Scotland and Northern Ireland, didn't.
Okay.
So that's a major difference.
Interesting. Very interesting observations. Alexander Mercurs, the Oracle of London, who is not in London. He is in an undislocation at the moment in the English countryside. Welcome everybody to a live chat on the Greek elections and anything that comes up on this Sunday
Mm.
evening or morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Let me know if the sound is good, if the picture is good, if Alexander's sound is good. Let us know if everything is showing up okay in this live stream. Thank you for joining us. Let's see where people are coming from. Alexander, we have Anthony. Kalispera, guys. Hey, Anthony, how you doing? Let's see where else. Virginia, USA. Gloria, hello, Gloria. Let's see. Jonasy from Wales. Let's see where else. From California, San Bernardino. Stuart from Scotland. Hello, Stuart. How you doing? Chat. How are you? Is New Democracy left wing? We'll
Mm.
answer that. Hello from Lower Saxony. Broken Spine. How you doing? Broken Spine from Antwerp, Belgium. Sydney, Australia. Sacramento, California. Let's see where else. Helen. Nice to see you both again. Hello, Helen. Hello, Simon. Yes, new haircut, Alexander. Did you get a haircut,
Yeah.
Alexander? Yeah.
Oh, my wife, I get my wife to do it for me, and she does it very well. I used to go, by the way, if I can just quickly say, to Trumpers, which is a very famous barber shop, and I get my shaving cream from there and other nice things. You find it mentioned in many books, but and my wife now does all my hair, cuts my hair for me, and she does it so well that I don't bother anyway.
All right. All right. So everybody hit that like button. If you're not subscribed, subscribe to the channel and share the channel with everybody you know. All right. Don't forget Wales voted for Brexit too. Thank you,
Oh, very
Josie.
true.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Very
One
true.
should never forget, but very true.
Casey from Oakland, CA. A lot of people from California. Very cool. My brother
Yeah.
lives in California. All right. S. Bennett, England, New York City, Gary. All right. Yorkshire. All right. A lot of people from all over, from Slovenia. Awesome. Thailand. Steve
Mm.
from Pennsylvania, Ontario, Canada. The home of Justin Trudeau. Where would the world be without Justin Trudeau?
Well, indeed.
The last of the neoliberals, Alexander, and let's use that word neoliberal to launch into
Mm.
the Greek elections, where the radical left, Alexis Tsipras and Syriza, well, at least they were radical left.
Mm.
They turned into very much globalist neoliberals. Once they got into power, they became one of the strongest allies of the Brussels elite, one of the
Mm.
strongest and most trusted allies Hello, Catherine. How you doing? From Sydney. One of the most trusted allies of Angela Merkel. Tsipras signed Greece away, signed Greece's wealth, its future, its prospects away till 2060 and till 2119. Alexander, you can get into the details of what Tsipras signed away. But let me give you the latest figures, and I'll let you take it over, Alexander. We have about 87% of the votes reported. We had a 57.8% turnout, Alexander.
Yes.
It's a low turnout, but it is summertime. Today the weather was plus 38, plus 39. A lot of people are at the beach. They're on holiday. 57% turnout. New Democracy has 39.77%. They're going to take 158 seats of the 300-seat parliament. Syriza has 31.55%, 86 seats. The old PASOK party, which used to be one of the old ruling parties of Andreas Papandreou, now they're called Movement for Change. They've rebranded. They took 7.9%, 22 seats. The Communist Party, 5.3%. Greek Solution, which is more of a right nationalist party, 3.7%. And the Varoufakis party, Yannis Varoufakis, a new party called MERA 25, MERA 25, got into parliament. You need 3% to get into parliament. They got in, squeaking by with 3.48% and 9 seats. Alexander, the neoliberal Tsipras is out. The conservative, they say conservative right. I call New Democracy more center-left. I don't really think there is a strong right in Greece. There never has been, but that's a debate that we could have. But Mitsotakis, from a very powerful political family, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, Harvard educated, Stanford educated, a very powerful political family. His nephew is now the mayor of Athens as well.
Yes.
He is the new Prime Minister of Greece. Alexander, take it away. What are your thoughts as to what happened today in Greece?
Well, I think this is my only surprise, actually, is that Tsipras and Syriza did as well as they did. I mean, let's be very clear about this. It's an absolute repudiation of Tsipras and of Syriza. We've seen the old establishment re-established because, of course, what Syriza was supposed to be all about when they came to power in 2015 was that they were going to sweep it all away. They were going to carry out this great purge of Greek politics. They were going to remove the oligarchs and the dynasts, the political dynasties that had dominated Greece for decades, going all the way back to the Second World War and beyond. And, of course, they were going to end austerity, the EU imposed austerity. They were going to make the economy grow. They were going to reverse the poverty that many Greek people were suffering from. They were going to revive the Greek economy. They were going to end corruption. I can remember all of these things that they were saying. And what has happened is that instead of those things happening, the diametric opposite happened. So they capitulated completely to the EU demands.
Quickly.
But not, I mean, unbelievably
quickly.
Unbelievably quickly. I mean, he was in power, as I remember, in January 2015. There was a sort of couple of months of rather hair-raising negotiations. Then in June, he called a referendum. June 2015, he called a referendum to reject the EU bailout proposals, which he said were unacceptable. He won the referendum with over 60% of the votes. And 48 hours later, he capitulated. And the extent of that capitulation was that he not only accepted EU bailout proposals, but they were not the EU bailout proposals he had previously rejected. They were even harsher ones. So instead of ending austerity, the EU imposed austerity, he increased it. And he's committed Greece to this unending system of debt repayments that will go on until 2060. with Greece required
2060, we're going to be
well,
paying debts.
we're going to be
I
paying
mean, I
debts.
want all our listeners to soak that in.
Absolutely.
2060.
I mean, I remember his finance minister, his first finance minister, Yanis Varoufakis, saying that Greece shouldn't borrow anymore because as it was already bankrupt. The last thing a bankrupt needs to do is add to its own debt. Well, of course, he borrowed and borrowed more than any other Greek government has done from the Europeans. So he did add to that debt, which explains why, as I said, we're going to be going on paying this debt until 2060. He committed Greece to a primary budget surplus of 3%. This is a budget surplus minus debt repayments. Now, that means, in effect, that the Greek government can't grow the economy by running a deficit for any kind of period, which all governments, by the way, at some point have to do. And most people, anyway, most economists say that a 3% primary surplus for Greece at this time is madness. It's actually contractionary. He's also privatized on a simply phenomenal scale. And this is going to go on until, as I said, the 22nd century, apparently. And, of course, the result is that the economy in Greece is trapped in a limbo. Now, some people who travel to Greece and or who read the Greek statistics or the statistics that Tsipras' government are churning out claim that there's been some sort of economic revival. What there has been is a general stabilization of the European economy, that is to say, of the entire EU economy, which is a result of the policies of the European Central Bank, which under Mario Draghi, its director, began a policy of quantitative easing and of buying bonds, government bonds, in places like Italy and Greece. Now, that, by the way, the European Central Bank, was not supposed to do. But anyway, it has done it, and that has created a temporary stabilization of the European economy. That meant that the contraction in Greece, the collapse in Greece, sort of slowed down. But you have always, when you're discussing economies, to look beyond these figures. If you discuss the real economy, the real economic situation in Greece, everybody who is involved in it will tell you the same thing, which is that it is deteriorating. And everybody in Greece who is involved and who is being impartial, I think, understands this. Even in those parts of the most affluent parts of Athens, like Kolonaki, for example, which is the sort of Greek, Upper East Side or Mayfair, or
Right.
call it what you will. You see shops closing and expensive boutiques closing down and unable to trade anymore. And the other thing you always hear now from more and more people is that, of course, Tsipras talked about a new, cleaner Greece in which people will be paying their taxes properly, because he's made these extraordinary commitments to the EU and has basically allowed the EU to run the Greek economy and to impose these impossibly high taxes in order to provide for this primary budget surplus. Taxes in Greece on businesses are now so high that tax evasion has grown to stratospheric levels. Everybody you have any dealings with in Greece on a professional or business basis now asks you to pay money under the table in cash, because if it's paid in conventional ways through the banking system, it has to be declared for tax. And as I said, people just don't make any profit from it anymore. So tax evasion has increased, even on the part of people who do not want to evade their taxes, who voted for Tsipras because they were looking to him to clean things up. And of course, last but not least, and as a direct product of all of this, what Mr. Tsipras has done is that he has created the situation for New Democracy, the establishment party, led by the dynasts, as he calls them, the oligarchs, as he also calls them, these powerful families like the Mitsotakis family that you were referring to. They've now come roaring back, and they're going to take power, and they have an absolute majority, as I understand it, in the Greek parliament.
Absolute majority, yeah.
So, as I said, I mean, it is, if I may say so, a crushing defeat for all the things that Tsipras did and for all the things that Tsipras promised, but a deserved one, because to be clear, he has led a terrible government, and I've only focused on the big economic story, which is of course the one that most affects most Greek people in their pockets, in their jobs, in their businesses, in all sorts of ways. I mean, I haven't discussed other things like the conduct of Greek foreign policy, for example, which has been completely turned on its head.
We'll get to that.
We'll no doubt get to that.
We'll get to that, Alexander. Let's stay a little bit with the economy. 1.3% growth, slower than expected. The markets were nervous under Tsipras, and it seems that under Mitsotakis, the markets are a little bit more confident.
Yes.
That's for sure. Tsipras has always said that he got Greece back into the markets and out of the bailout spiral, the bailout deals. So he has that. That's what he ran on, basically, is that he got Greece back into the markets. I don't know what that really means, because it's just more borrowing, more and more borrowing.
Well, exactly.
But the rate of growth is worrying. Mitsotakis, you mentioned, he is elitist establishment. Is he a neoliberal? Many people in the chat are saying, how are the neoliberals defeated? Well, Tsipras claimed that he wasn't a neoliberal. He was actually a radical left when he first entered the political scene, but he turned into a staunch neoliberal. Mitsotakis, well, you could say he's a neoliberal. Some may say that he comes from a family of neocons. I mean, his family is very close to the Bush family.
Yeah.
His father, Mitsotakis, is as about establishment oligarch Greek as you can get. Mitsotakis, well, American educated, very intelligent guy, speaks 4 languages.
Yes.
We'll see what he brings to the table, if anything. But, New Democracy governments, whether it was Mitsotakis, who was also prime minister, Kyriakos' father, or whether it was like Karamanlis, who was the last New Democracy president's prime minister, they don't have a very good track record. That's an understatement. They tend to only serve one term and then they're out. Yes. So, Alexander, tackle the economy and what Tsipras did and what you expect from a Mitsotakis government.
I think it's very important to stress that I think Tsipras, as I said, has actually weakened the entire economic structure in Greece, because he's talked about Greece rejoining the markets, which is a perverse argument, actually, for a radical leftist to make, which is what Tsipras claimed he was. I mean, what Tsipras was talking about when he became prime minister was not about rejoining the markets. It was about ending austerity. It was something completely different. Now, Greece arguably was close to that position in 2015. I think it's very difficult to say that things would have been worse in Greece if if Tsipras hadn't come in the way that he did. So I have to say that I think that Tsipras took a bad situation in Greece and he's made it worse. And this 1.3% growth that is being talked about, I don't personally believe in it, frankly. I mean, I think that the real economy, the economy which is going to produce the jobs and the wealth in Greece, is actually probably, in reality, still contracting. But even if you do believe in it, 1.3% growth is not going to take Greece out of this abysmal hole into which it's in, largely because of this massive debt that Mr. Tsipras himself has added to. So, as I said, I don't think we can look to this as being a good outcome, not by any means. Now, can I just say something about Mitsotakis? I mean, I know very little about him. I know a lot about his family. As you said, he's an educated man. At least with New Democracy, they are what they are. I mean, they've always been an establishment party. They've always been a, if you like, small c conservative party.
Would you say they're more neoliberal or neoconservative? Like, where do you think they fall on the spectrum? Because I mean, they are insiders. They're about as insider, establishment, elitist as you can get. This there's no doubt about.
Exactly. I mean, I think they will change their position with whatever comes. So, but they will always be, you know, on the inside. So they won't be. I don't really think it helps talking about them as being neoliberals or neoconservatives. What they will see is if, you know, Washington is taking a particular line, they will be fairly close to it because they will always see it as in their interests and in Greece's interests to remain on good terms with Washington. At least they are consistent in this. Tsipras came in, promised something completely different, and he didn't deliver. He did the opposite of what he said he would do.
Alexander, here's a question that's kind of interesting. What would have happened with Greece if Tsipras kept Yannis Varoufakis as his Minister of Finance? This comes from Heiko 58. This is actually an interesting question that a lot of people, you know, always talk about. Where would Greece be if Tsipras followed Varoufakis' advice?
Well, what Varoufakis was clearly working towards was establishing an alternative currency to the euro. I mean, he was taking gradual steps in that direction. Of course, he denies it. But if you read a book by Galbraith, an American academic who was economist academic, who was actually quite close to Varoufakis, you get a sense where all of this was going. So Greece there would have been a Grexit from the Eurozone. Now, that would have come with a default. My own view, and I should stress, not a great fan of Varoufakis, is that had that happened, there would have been a year of great economic chaos in Greece, but eventually things might have started to pick up. And I would say something else. If Varoufakis had Tsipras' full backing, and if Tsipras and Varoufakis had worked intelligently and had not been so arrogant in the conduct of the negotiations with the EU, which is something that is never acknowledged even by them, and I am familiar, by the way, with all the excuses and explanations that Varoufakis has come up with, I think that they could have done a deal with Wolfgang Schäuble, the German finance minister. He was saying to the Greeks, look, your economic situation is unsustainable. You should never have joined the euro. You can't pay these debts. We'll freeze your loan repayments. You leave the euro. We in Germany will give you the Europeans, 50 billion euros to tide you over. And then after a certain period of time, when the economy is growing properly and things have recovered, then maybe at some point you might be able to join the Eurozone again. Now, we know that happened because a few weeks ago, I mean, Alex Christoforou and I have discussed this many times over many years. In fact, the very first conversation we had, the very first time we met, and we had this conversation in a park in Moscow. We were talking about the negotiations that had been going on, and this was in 2015. And we said at the time that, Schäuble had been completely misrepresented in the Greek media as this monster, when in fact he was the person who was offering the solution. But in those days, it was all disputed and contested. We now know that, in fact, that analysis was true. Schäuble was prepared to make those offers because he confirmed that in a vast interview he gave for the Financial Times, which Alex Christoforou and I covered in an earlier video that we did for the Duran. Now, if all that had happened, I think, as I said, there would have been perhaps a year of disruption. But then we would have seen real growth in the economy. Unemployment would have fallen. Living standards would have risen. I don't buy the idea that there would have been a massive inflation. Might have been initially, but we could have smoothed it over. And then, as I said, we would have seen some movement forward in Greece. That would have been only the first step, because Greece is in need of fundamental reforms in its taxation system, in its civil service, in many things. Whether those reforms would have happened under a Tsipras Varoufakis government, frankly, I very much doubt. And in any event, we are talking about a hypothetical possibility which never arose because, of course, there was never any chance with Mr. Tsipras that it ever would.
All right. And Varoufakis always was and is an interesting character. He will be in the parliament. His party did make it to parliament.
Yes.
Dimitar says, can you tell us your opinion on Varoufakis and his role and experience? I think you outlined it pretty well, Alexander, about Varoufakis, but him being in parliament, will be interesting to watch, whether you agree with him or not.
Yes. I should just, by the way, declare something about Varoufakis, which is that he and I were apparently schoolmates. We were supposedly in the same class at primary school in Greece. I have no memory of him at all, and I'm sure he doesn't remember me. But anyway, I've been told by several people that we were actually in the same class together at school, so who knows. But anyway, I'm going to say this about Varoufakis. He is a brilliant academic economist. I mean, I know people call him a Marxist. He's not really a Marxist. He is a brilliant academic economist. He has written about game theory. I know that he is... that side of him has also been misunderstood. I have it on unimpeachable authority that he is extremely vain and very arrogant as a person. Even
I don't think that's a surprise.
No, I mean, even his own teachers, when he was a student, apparently were telling him, hold on, Yanis, all your writing is absolutely brilliant stuff, but you can't write about other economists in this way that you're doing, in which you're ridiculing and mocking their ideas. I mean, you can't write about, Schumpeter or Hayek in this awful way that you're doing. I mean, that's not how it's done. And I should tell you, I've spoken to some of his teachers when he was a student. So he's overconfident. He's too arrogant. He's very abrasive. I mean, his conduct of the negotiations was an appalling one. And to an extent that he doesn't understand even now how misjudged his conduct of the negotiations was. Having said which, he is an extremely clever man. He has a far better understanding of the problems of the economy than Tsipras ever did. And I personally, despite all the huge misgivings about him and my criticisms for what he did in 2015, I am pleased he's in the Greek parliament, because he will no doubt add some critical commentary, which we really haven't seen in Greece for over the last couple of years.
All right, it's some questions with Golden Dawn, which is the far right. Some would say neo-Nazi. Some people would say nationalist party. It depends how you look at them. They are very controversial. Golden Dawn. They did,
Yeah.
as of now, they have not made it to Parliament. They're at about
Yes.
2.8%, and you need
Yes.
3% to get to Parliament. So as of now, Golden Dawn has not made it to Parliament. Those are the latest updates with 87% of the votes tallied. Moon over Miami says, I hate to tell you, but New Democracy Mitsotakis also, in all caps, identifies himself and his party as neoliberals. Yes, my title is getting a lot of backlash, Alexander, because I called Tsipras neoliberal. Tsipras became
Oh yeah.
neoliberal, no doubt about it, guys.
No doubt
He may
about
have
it.
said he was radical left. He became neoliberal. Now, Mitsotakis and New Democracy, the verdict is out. We say, is he establishment? Absolutely. Is he a globalist? Absolutely. You know, is he part of the globalist dynasty, Bush, kind of cut from that Bush cloth? Yes. No
Yes.
doubt about it. His father was prime minister. His older sister was the mayor of Athens. His nephew is now the current mayor of Athens. This is a political dynasty. Neoliberal, perhaps. Neoconservative, perhaps. We will see. We will see exactly what happens with Mitsotakis. He's promising a Greece for everybody. Of course, the Greeks have heard these promises for a long, long time. We will wait and see what's going to happen with Mitsotakis. Let's get to some super chats, Alexander, and see what people are saying. From Penguins fans, Tsipras should be in jail right now. Betrayed. $5 super chat from Penguins fan. Thank you very much. From Lechat, a €5 super chat. Thank you, Lechat. Barbara, €5 super chat. Thank you for that super chat, Barbara. Rainy Steps, super chat. Is Golden Dawn still around? Yes, Golden Dawn is around. We'll see if they'll make it to Parliament. Right now, it looks like they won't make it to Parliament. They're going to end up just short of Parliament to get that 3% benchmark. They're at about 2.8%, and pretty much most of the votes are counted, so it doesn't look like they will be in Parliament. Penguins fan, throw Tsipras in jail for betraying his people. He definitely betrayed the people's vote. The people voted, I believe, 67% for him to go to Brussels and renegotiate the austerity deal. It wasn't about removing Greece from the EU or Eurozone. The mandate was to go to Brussels and renegotiate better terms. And he didn't do that. He signed perhaps the worst terms you could have possibly signed when he went to Brussels. And another super chat from Penguins fan. What will Greece's relationship with Russia be like now that Tsipras is gone? Alexander, you mentioned foreign policy gaffes under Tsipras, and so let's jump into the foreign policy outlook for Greece. Relations with Russia have been extremely strained. Greece does appear to be well within the NATO-US orbit. My take on Mitsotakis is that that's not going to change. Mitsotakis is very much part of that NATO-EU. He is pro-EU. He is part of Angela Merkel's party structure, CDU type of branch of governance. And he is well established American insider, American educated. I don't see much changing as far as relations with Russia, but Alexander, you have a much better take on this. So what happened with Tsipras and where you see things going?
I think the Russians will be very pleased to see Tsipras gone, actually. I agree completely with your analysis of Mitsotakis. I think the Russian analysis of Mitsotakis is exactly the same. But there is a fundamental difference between him and Tsipras as far as the Russians are concerned, which is that Mitsotakis is consistent. I come back to this point repeatedly. He is consistent in what he is. The Russians know where they stand with him. They know that they are dealing with someone who is aligned with the United States, who is aligned with the EU, who is an ally of the United States, and who is loyal to NATO. Nonetheless, I think that they calculate that they can work with Mitsotakis and that any agreements they make with Mitsotakis will actually stick because they consider him consistent and reliable. The problem with Tsipras is that they don't trust him. He came in at the time when he became Prime Minister of Greece, there was even serious talk that Greece might veto sanctions that were being imposed on Russia. Now, he never actually committed to that, and I never believed he would do it. But that was the extent to which he appeared to suggest that there would be this huge change of policy towards Russia. And of course, he went to Russia in 2015. He met with Putin at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum at a time when other European leaders were not going to Russia because of the Ukrainian crisis. He was negotiating, or appeared to be negotiating, gas deals with the Russians. And what the Russians found, and they found it out very quickly, was that none of this was real, that this was all a game that Tsipras was playing in order to create this Russian bogey to scare the Europeans into giving him more than they might otherwise do. In other words, he was using them. And the Russians, as I so well remember, in 2015 became very angry because they don't like to be used in that way. Putin didn't take to Tsipras at all, and relations between Greece and Russia have never recovered. Now, the other thing I must say, and I'm taking this from an article in The Guardian, which has just appeared, because he put it so well, though of course it's something that Alex and I have discussed on many programs, is that once he reversed course so completely on the question of the EU bailout in 2015, Tsipras began to reverse course on everything. So where he'd stood as a Greek patriot who would fight for Greece, he capitulated to NATO demands on the renaming of North Macedonia. He seemed to buy in to the European claims about Russian interference in Greek elections. He seems to be colluding with the attempts by the US ambassador to Greece, Jeffrey Pyatt, who was formerly ambassador to Ukraine, to try to get the Greek Orthodox Church to recognize this breakaway church, not breakaway, this schismatic church, Orthodox church that's been set up in Ukraine with the blessings of the Patriarch of Constantinople. He's been going all down the line, in effect, supporting the US against Russia. I think that Mitsotakis, though he will always take a pro-American position, will probably not want to go as far as Tsipras has done, because I think Mitsotakis, coming from a political dynasty and from a political tradition represented by New Democracy, which has much more experience of international diplomacy than Tsipras did, will understand the importance of trying to maintain a certain, I won't say equidistance between the US and Russia, but at least a kind of connection to Russia, which I think Tsipras has practically destroyed. So I think the Russians will be pleased to see Tsipras go. And on the question of Tsipras's betrayals, which several of our viewers have discussed, I'm going to say something which may surprise people about Tsipras and about his departure, which is that I've heard from several left-wing people in Greece that they are very relieved to see Tsipras go. They would perhaps not want Mitsotakis to be prime minister, but they would far rather have a genuine and straightforward conservative rather than a neoliberal masquerading as a leftist. And can I say, neoliberal is what he is.
Great point, Alexander. I'll also let people in the chat know that a lot of my sources tell me that many people in the upper ranks of the Kukue, the Communist Party, as well as PASOK, which was the old traditional left of Greece. When Tsipras came to power, they all said one thing: this guy is going to ruin it for left parties for the next 50 years. There will not be a left party getting into the prime minister's seat for another 50 years because of this guy. He's going to ruin the name of the left. And that is exactly what's happened. So that's an excellent point that you made, Alexander, as to how the left views Tsipras. Yeah. Now, let's not forget that there was the tragedy in Mati, the fires as well, which a lot of people were angry about. So that also played a role in Tsipras' defeat. Alexander, are you worried about a greater Macedonia now that this deal has been signed? Does this worry you? I mean, you have to look further into the future here, but is this something of concern?
I think at the moment, and if you're talking about the next 10 years, possibly not. But, and this is the point to understand about this whole Northern Macedonia thing. The whole situation in the Balkans is becoming increasingly unstable and is unraveling. Because you see outside powers, of which I mean basically the United States and the EU, coming in and involving themselves in the Balkans to an increasing degree, because they see the Balkans as this battlefield, if you like, of ideas and geopolitics with Russia. I mean, this is a completely misconceived approach. And what it has meant is, because they don't see Greece as the adversary, they see Serbia, which they see as aligned with Russia in some form, as the potential adversary. That means spreading nationalism in all these micro-states that they are surrounding Serbia with. Now, the problem is, in Macedonia, strengthening nationalism there could very easily direct itself against Greece, which I should also add is Serbia's strongest friend in the Balkans. So I don't see exactly a crisis between just Northern Macedonia and Greece. I see an overall crisis beginning to develop in the Balkans. Now, this may take some time to evolve, but evolve one day it will, because the Balkans now is extremely unstable. You have a Serbia, which is very angry and very embittered, surrounded by microstates, unstable microstates like Macedonia, Bosnia, you can call Bosnia a state, Kosovo, Albania. Montenegro, Albania, exactly, which is many problems of another sort. All of them with Serbia having irredentist claims against all of them. And you have situations where Albania and Greece and this Northern Macedonia potentially also have claims against Greece. And anybody who knows Balkan history well, as we both do, knows that this situation is inherently unstable and simply cannot last. So at some point, I foresee a crisis, and by creating this situation in Macedonia, it's going to be much more difficult for Greece not to become involved in it.
Okay, let's get to a couple more super chats, Alexander, and maybe we'll move on to some more topics. There's some people in the chat talking about Epstein. That was a big story. Maybe we'll tackle that for a little bit. I don't know if we even want to tackle that, but maybe we will. Let's get to some more super chats, Alexander. From Steve P. Doesn't Economics 101 tell you if income, i.e. GDP, goes down, the ability to repay loans goes down?
Yes, it does. Because that's exactly Economics 101. That's the economics that Mr. Tsipras did not accept. That was the economics of the Eurogroup, the group of Eurozone finance ministers that Varoufakis was negotiating with, didn't accept either. So the questioner is absolutely right. The point I always make is that one finance minister did understand it, and that was Wolfgang Schäuble. Schäuble said, this situation is unsustainable. It cannot endure. If we just patch it up, sooner or later it will come back to haunt us. Tsipras, Angela Merkel, and Barack Obama, because he was also involved, he was on the phone to Merkel at that time, urging her, as he put it, to keep Greece in the Eurozone. They didn't listen to what Schäuble was saying, and that's why we have this unsustainable situation, which is follows exactly the point that the questioner has made.
All right. From Simon, my son is on holiday in Crete. Are the Greek islands politically much different to the mainland? Yes, they are different to the main. Usually the mainland goes blue for New Democracy. Usually the islands traditionally have gone back when I was living full-time in Greece, were usually green, PASOK. Crete, I know, was a solid movement for change, which is the new PASOK party. So the islands traditionally go left, and the mainland usually goes blue for New Democracy. That's usually the tradition. And this year kind of held to about the same standard. From Penguins fan, what will Greece's relationship with Erdogan's Turkey be like with this new leader? Good question.
Very, very, very good
Turkey
question.
is all over the news too. Alexander will probably do a video on what's going on with Turkey and Libya as well, which is, my God, this war is really spiraling out of control now in Libya and in Tripoli, and Turkey is full in on it. They are doubling down. But Greece and Turkey now, what's going to go on here?
I think the answer to that is that it's going to depend much less on Greece and much more on Turkey, because the initiative is held by Turkey. I mean, Turkey, let's be very clear about this, a much more powerful country than Greece. So it's got a far bigger military than Greece. Greece has a very good military in some areas, and Greece has a strong air force.
Outstanding air force.
Outstanding air force, Air force. So as I said, we're not completely unmatched. But it's Turkey, which always ultimately is pushing the situation. It's the one that's pushing against the status quo. My own personal guess is, again, and we have to wait and see, but I think that Mitsotakis, again, because he has, or at least is able to draw on better experience, he has more international contacts and more international understanding than Tsipras did. And perhaps in places like Moscow and Washington, more goodwill than Tsipras did. Certainly in Moscow, he may be able to contain this problem better. As I said, in Tsipras' case, the simple fact is his relations with Russia are very bad now. And as I said, if Mitsotakis can improve those, the one country at the moment which has perhaps the greatest influence in Turkey, which might act as a restraint on Turkey, is Russia, simply because Erdogan has committed himself so closely to his economic and political links with Russia and with with the situation in Syria, that he might not be able to completely refuse any pressure from Moscow if it comes from there. So it might be that Mitsotakis has a few more cards to play and might play them with rather more skill than Tsipras would have done. But this is a dangerous situation with Turkey, and I'm afraid there's no simple magic answer.
And we have a lot of energy and oil pipelines now in the mix. That includes Cyprus, the drilling in the Mediterranean, and of course we know about what's happening with Turkey's drilling as well, or their exploration for oil and natural gas in the Mediterranean around Cyprus as well. So, I mean, it's also a very volatile situation what's shaping up there. Alexander, let's take some more questions from Nicholas. Do you think that the inclusion of all those Balkan microstates in the EU could help calm the irredentists down and stabilize the Balkans? So you think that the inclusion to the EU, and that argument is made often, that the EU, will prevent any hostilities from happening, especially in places like the Balkans.
It's an argument that is always made, and it is an argument which always proves wrong. If you look at the great conflicts, the two big conflicts that have happened in Europe since the end of the Cold War, the Yugoslav wars and the war in Ukraine, they are both a direct product of pressure on these regions being brought by the EU. What the EU does when it moves into these territories is it supports the most militant nationalist forces. The EU always supports nationalists, except when you find them in places like France or Britain or such places where they act democratically. In the Balkans, where nationalists are not always very democratic and not always very likable people, in fact, there's often very dangerous people, that's unfortunately where they tend to get supported. I think, on the contrary, what you will see is if these countries are incorporated into the EU, you will see the same thing reproduce itself as you now see, say, in the Baltic states, where it will entrench very hard-line nationalist politicians in power who will represent enormous threats to going forward to the overall stability of the region.
Okay. From path to autonomy, what can be done about the low birth rates in Greece? Good question. What can be done?
Well,
Greek people need to get married and replenish the culture. What else can you say? But, going to the birth rate, I was in a taxi, Alexander, today, and the taxi driver was telling me he has a family. He said he has a family of two, a young guy, maybe, 40 years old. Family of two, his salary, he works for a big tech company. His salary was 850 euros gross. After taxes, he took home 600 euros. And he drives a cab all day Saturday and all day Sunday. And he's like, I've got a master's degree. I'm a software developer. And that's the situation going on now in Greece. So, I mean, when you have that dynamic in a country, it's very hard to keep a family afloat. So,
indeed.
So that has to change.
Indeed so. And of course, what happens is a lot of the young people, the kind of people who might be having children and are leaving. I mean, they're going. So, I mean, Greece is losing its young because they can't stay in Greece because there's no future for them there. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. From Bila Super Chat, judging by your names, aren't you both of Greek heritage? Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. We are.
I absolutely. I mean, very, very much so.
Yeah, very much so.
Very, very much so. And if I may say so, I mean, we're talking about Mitsotakis being a member of a political dynasty. So I belong to a political dynasty as well. I mean, of course, my political dynasty, which goes back to before the First World War. It's actually been around longer, I think, than Mitsotakis has been. We were associated with Andreas Papandreou's PASOK party. And I, as a member of one of those dynasties, was pleased when Tsipras came along and said that he would sweep this style of politics away. I felt that, we needed an opening up of the political system, and a political system that was more responsive and more representative of the Greek people in general. But of course, that's not what we got. We got instead a terrible time, a terrible 5 years, a terrible 4 years, with Tsipras. And of course, the reinforcement of the old system instead of its replacement.
Yeah, from 2008 to 2016, Alexander, I was reading 275,000 businesses closed, and the Greek economy shrank by 28 to 30%. It's incredible.
Yes.
It's absolutely incredible.
Yes.
All right, super chat from Penguins fan. Cyprus, will it lean towards Turkey or Greece?
Well, I think, Alex, as somebody from Cyprus, you could perhaps understand this better than me. But I mean, I don't think you could ever. First of all, one important point to make is that Cyprus is an independent country. It follows its own policies. and it is a country that is very, very strong about its following its national interests, stronger than Greece is. It's got a, I think, much stronger political system than Greece has, and there's never been anyone that remotely approximates to Tsipras leading Cyprus that I can remember. I mean, you might correct me, but I mean, I've always got the impression that the political leadership in Cyprus is much better. Now, I mean, the Republic of Cyprus, the official Cyprus, has very strong connections with Greece. I mean, we are two Greeks. We're part of the Greek nation in a sense. I mean, both parts of it are in Greek
Hellenism, the Hellenic. Yeah.
Hellenic, exactly. So, I mean, that always creates a connection. But I have to say this also. It's not a connection which politically has always done Cyprus much good. For example, Cyprus, which has tended to have a very well-run economy, in the run-up to the 2008 crisis and afterwards, many Cypriot banks, for all kinds of reasons, were persuaded to buy into Greek debt. And when Greece had to seek bailouts and fell into crisis, the Cypriot banks were very, very badly affected. And in 2013, that triggered a massive banking crisis in Cyprus. So it's a connection that, I think in some ways, because I think people in Cyprus understand increasingly that it's problematic. I think it's a connection which is gradually getting weaker. But of course, it will never go away entirely, because we always still have these, as I said, this sense of being part of the Hellenic world that Alex was talking about. So, I mean, we can't really compare the Republic of Cyprus with Turkey.
Yeah, and you mentioned the banking crisis when it hit in Cyprus as well. They've made it a point to decouple the Cypriot financial system from the Greek financial system. I mean, now there's not one connection left. Before, you used to have Bank of Cyprus, Hellenic Bank, and Laiki Bank. They were operating in Greece. These were Cypriot banks that had a very strong presence in Greece. I mean, they had hundreds of stores, hundreds of branches, and they got swallowed up by Piraeus, by the Greek banks, for pennies on the dollar. I mean, I think they bought all the Cypriot banks for around $500 million, everything, all the branches, all the assets, you name it. They bought them all up, and the Cypriot banks were fully out of Greece when the crisis hit. So, I mean, the European Union created a very clear and distinct separation between the two countries after the crisis. I mean, that was very, very obvious. It was brutal. It was a brutal time. I mean, I was in Cyprus at the time when the EU decided to come down hard on Cyprus and close down banks. And I mean, they shut down a bank and people had money in that bank account. Some, businesses. I knew a guy that had a business and he had, like a couple 100,000 ready to make payroll on a Friday, and that money was gone that Monday. Alexander, you still with me? Alexander? I think we lost Alexander. His Skype connection. Let's wait and see if he comes back to us. Are you there, Alexander? Let's see, he's calling again. Alexander, you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're back.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry. Come in.
No worries. All right. I was just talking about what happened in Cyprus, Alexander.
Yes, absolutely.
Look, how long have we been going on now? Let's see here. We've gone on for almost an hour. All right. 1,140 people. All right. Watching this live stream. Hit that like button, everybody. Share the channel with everyone that you know. Let's see. We don't have any more super chat questions, Alexander, so we could wrap this up. And he's gone again.
Right.
All right, you're back.
Oh, have I gone again? Oh dear. I'm back.
You're back now. and you're gone again. All right, guys. We'll wrap it up here. We'll wrap it up here. It's late. It's almost 1 o'clock. Alexander's 2 hours behind, but it looks like he's having connection problems out in the country. So we'll call it a night. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this live stream with the Greek elections. And we were going to talk a little bit about the Epstein news, but Alexander's connection is running very poor now. So we'll leave it for, maybe we'll do a live either tomorrow or Wednesday. I'm not sure yet. We may do a complete Duran live, either Monday or Wednesday. We'll see. We'll try to send out a notification and let you guys know ahead of time. So we'll let Alexander sign off, and I will sign off as well. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into this live chat, this live stream. Have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Take care. Thank you very much. Until next time, everybody. Bye-bye.